Hi there and welcome to this lesson. Negotiation tactics are very important for you to master in order to achieve great deal results. Tactics work both ways. They can be used on you and they can be used by you. After completing this lesson, you will be able to recognize tactics used by the other party and learn how to apply effective tactics yourself. Learning more about tactics is important because tactics don't show themselves easily. If they would not be effective. Most used tactics are difficult to identify, very subtle, and used for multiple purposes. Getting to recognize the most popular tactics will help you to negotiate way more efficiently. It's important to know how and when to use particular tactics in order to get more of what you want from the negotiation. Your ultimate deal result will be determined by how skilled you are as a negotiator. The more skilled you are, the more the other party will be drawn to settle close to your ideal outcome and closer to their limit. Your selection of negotiation tactics should depend on your personality and the results of your earlier research on the tactics that will probably be used by your negotiation counterpart. As discussed earlier, negotiators should always pursue a win-win outcome. So do not try to be someone you are not. A tactic that works well for another negotiator may not work for you. However, that does not mean that you should never try something new. The successful application of your planned negotiation tactics requires a great deal of planning. You must be prepared to respond to protect your own goals and make progress towards an agreement. This lesson gives you an overview of the most popular negotiation tactics and how to recognize them. If you identify the tactics in an early stage of your upcoming negotiations, you are less likely to respond to them in the way the other party has been aiming for. Remember, it's people who negotiate, not companies. You will use your tactics on people whose personalities vary enormously. The same tactics will work differently on persons in different circumstances or at different times. In my time as a procurement manager, I had to deal with 1,500 different products delivered by 70 different suppliers every year. Suppliers were traditionally better equipped. Most account managers that I had been dealing with only had to focus on one customer and thus the negotiator, me. This led to what I call the knowledge gap. They had way more time to prepare for negotiations. Most of them kept detailed notes on my likes and dislikes, interests, family, details, and so on. In general, they were in a better position to choose the most appropriate tactic to approach me in the upcoming negotiation. My advantage, on the other hand, was the fact that I was negotiating all day and year. That experience leveraged the knowledge gap mostly. I practiced full year with changing styles and using tactics. This helped me to have one important skill in any negotiation: I was unpredictable. Enough said for now. Let's dive into a large number of tactics that you can use in your own negotiations. We will teach you which tactics to use, when to use them, and in what way you should use them. Number 1. Drop the bomb. This is a suggestion that a failure to concede will lead to possible catastrophic consequences. This means using threats as, "This may only be a small order, but failure to agree could affect all your businesses with the whole group." When suppliers tried to use this technique on me in my negotiations, I countered it by saying calmly, "I see," instead of asking if they were threatening me. When the drop bomb was a way out of line, I indicated that I was prepared to walk away. Number 2. Postpone. Putting off an item or issue that you had not planned for to another meeting or to a later stage in the negotiation, giving yourself time to work out a position on the issue. Or, even better, as the negotiation proceeds, issues often resolve themselves and there's no need to revisit it. When suppliers try to postpone variables in my negotiations, I extra pressure them on just these. They were either afraid to deal with it because it's important for them, or they just had not taken a position on it yet. By pushing while they wanted to postpone by asking many questions, I could corner my negotiation counterpart and directly gained an upper hand. Number 3 is the journalist trick. At the start of my career, I worked a few years as a journalist. What I learned in that period is that people gave me the best quotes after the official part, walking away towards the exit door when I just asked my final question in the interview. Remember this in any negotiation. Just as the pen of the supplier is above the upcoming deal, you may say something like, "And does that include this and that, or doesn't it?" Always think ahead of any negotiation of 2 things that are nice to have included in your last sentence and use them at the end of your negotiation. It has taken some time to get this far, even better. The chances to achieve another concession are high, working on the basis that the other party will not want to waste what has been agreed on. Use this carefully and you can get just a little bit more out of your deal. Number 4. Bluffing is a good tactic to get you out of any unwanted situation in the negotiation, but it requires great skill to avoid failing over. If you are going to bluff, make sure to always be aware of what you will do if your bluff is called. Have a backup plan. Bluffing, while it may be ethical, does entail risks. The bluffer who is called loses credibility and can get out of hand. Also remember that most negotiations are carried out with people with whom you will have a continuing relationship with. In my years as a negotiator, I tried to avoid bluffing as much as possible because I like to have my facts straight. If you ever have the feeling that your negotiation counterpart is bluffing, your tactic to counter it is asking many in-depth further questions about the subject. Do this and you will know within 1 minute if your negotiation counterpart is bluffing or not. Number 5, hanging gramophone record. This tactic was one of the ones I hated the most. I don't have any patience, so I really don't like people repeating their messages over and over again. That being said, I have to admit it does work. Why? Because the other party gets fed up with the constant repetition and feels that further progress appears unlikely until this obstacle is removed. To use this tactic, you need to be very patient and persistent, but if you have both, try it and enjoy the guaranteed results. Number 6, deadlines. Pretty helpful if you have to close many deals. In my time as a procurement manager for a large global retailer, I had to deal with 70 suppliers in one period of the year. Most contracts were starting on the 1st of January. This pushed me to plan strict and to work with clear deadlines. I divided my suppliers into 3 blocks. With suppliers in block 1, I negotiated in September and October. With suppliers in block 2, I negotiated in November and December. And with suppliers in block 3, I negotiated in January and February. If we didn't reach an agreement in the block, the supplier had to wait until March to close the deal again. This tactic worked really well, but I have to tell that the position of power helped me in this. Most suppliers were more dependent on my company than the other way around. Deadlines can be imposed, which is always the most preferable option, or agreed upon and can encourage parties to concentrate on creative solutions while simultaneously realizing that concessions are necessary. Number 7, pretend to be less smart than you are. This is a particularly useful tactic to buy time to think after a complicated proposal or explanation. Could you just run through that again? Either gives you time or discourages the other party from using such complication. Alternatively, you throw in at the last minute, "We naturally assumed that your price included packaging tax," or "We thought that you will be aware that our standard payment terms are 90 days. In negotiations, when I did not know how to answer a difficult question from my negotiation counterpart, I countered with another question to them to buy myself time to think about how to answer their question. Number 8, silence. Silence is a great tactic to diffuse emotion and people with a temper. Generally, people are uncomfortable with silence. Many feel that they have to fill it, and usually what they fill it with weakens their position. Use this knowledge to your advantage in negotiations. Most people can't stand silence and are the first to fill it, very often with a concession. Silence also allows you thinking time, enables you to gain or regain position, and puts pressure on the other party. If you would like to learn how to counter silence used by your negotiation counterpart, I use the following. I thought that I would appreciate a response to my last statement. I used even more silence in return, or, last but not least, I started the irritating use of the broken record gramophone technique again. Number 9, the hypothetical question. A technique that helps every conversation and thus negotiations is to talk about what if. It helps you to test your own assumptions, to determine how serious the other person is, and this technique helps negotiations forward when there seems no room more left to move. If I were to give you A, how would you feel about doing B? By asking this question, you're not making a step offerwise, you're using words to find out the level of flexibility at the other side of the table and what it might be possible to agree upon. This can be useful for checking a new idea or can help to break deadlock situations within your negotiation. If used during the testing stage, it can open up useful alternatives and help shape a deal. I used to counter this tactic in my negotiations as follows. I took their question and returned it. If I understand you right, you are saying that you're prepared to do A. Number 10, salami. Designing your negotiation in as many small slices as possible and try to come to an agreement piece per piece until the other party says no. This tactic often produces concessions because the other party wishes to get away from increasingly uncomfortable situations. Tell the other party that it will not be possible to reach an agreement until all the issues are agreed on. Only then can a full and fair agreement be reached. I really disliked the salami tactic used by suppliers. If I even suspected in a tiny bit that my negotiation counterpart was using this technique, I directly told them to stop this and I would not continue the negotiations until they would present their full proposal. Number 11, why? Don't be afraid to challenge the other party, especially at the start of the negotiation when positions are being defined. The more details in the storyline at the other side of the table, the greater the opportunity to find something which can be exploited to your advantage. Don't use the why tactic every 5 minutes. If you use it too often, it can cause frustration and inhibit the other party from putting forward alternatives. If you do ask why, you may get some very good reasons, so you should prepare to counter bad answers directly. I almost never ask this question in negotiations. I truly believe that negotiating is about the exchange of proposals and not about convincing the other party of the why behind an argument or proposal. Negotiators that put all of their time and effort in exchanging proposals rather than convincing the other party about what is right or wrong are rare to find. Try to become one yourself and I promise you that you will come towards a deal faster than you expected. Number 12 is all or nothing. You present the other party with just 2 options. One is so awful, think of an example the other party would never say yes to, so they agree to the other option. Prepare for measures when they unexpectedly say no in advance. I only presented routes towards my suppliers when we were in a deadlock situation. In these situations, I presented them with the cooperative and my uncooperative plan, and they could decide for themselves which routes they would prefer. Because all tactics mentioned can be used in interrelational settings between people, it is essential to study the person you are going to negotiate with. As stated earlier, It's people who negotiate, not companies. Tactic X will work better on some people than tactic Y. Also, the same tactic will work differently on the same person in different circumstances or at different times. Awareness is half of your solution. The first step in successfully negotiating with a party that is using tactics is to identify the tactic and thus to be aware of what they are doing. Many of the tactics are quite obvious and can be easily recognized when being used against you. As mentioned earlier, if you are able to identify the used tactics fast, you are less likely to respond to it in a way the other party was hoping for. Therefore, you gain or retain a degree of control in your negotiation. That was it for this lesson. Thanks for your attention and looking forward to seeing you in the next lesson.